So I'm going to take you through a little bit about how I came to be here today and some of the things I learned along the way, which is hopefully relevant to what we will be talking about over the next 3 days. And Jeremy, my beautiful assistant, now is going to do the slides for me. So this was me, Jeremy, my mom and his family in 2018. As he said, we met in San Francisco. I think it was March or April or something, and Jeremy happened to visit Australia a few months later. So this was us in Gold Coast. He's got 3 kids now, so he's been busy. And I call him a friend and a brother from another mother today. And I think we wouldn't be here if we didn't know how important empathy was. We all understand why it's important. But I think my conversations with Jeremy over the years has got me thinking a lot more about it, and has put it in the forefront of my mind. But you know, when I think about this man, and we talk on the phone a lot more than we see each other, I think about this, and it's that the true measure of a person is how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. When I first met Jeremy, it was the first long-haul flight that I'd taken after this injury. So I got the chance to go to San Francisco, and I was umming and ahhing about it for a little while. I was a bit worried traveling with a wheelchair for 14 hours on an aeroplane. But my mum, who's here, she encouraged me to take the shot. You can wave, Mum. And so I went, and I happened to meet Jeremy there, and we became friends. And it was a time where I could do nothing for him, but he's always been kind to me. And actually, it was Jeremy who encouraged me to write a book and to do a lot of the things that I've done over the last few years. And every morning I wake up and I think about the things that I'm grateful for in my life, and the friendships are one of them. And meeting Jeremy is one of the things that I've been so grateful for over the last few years that we've known each other. But I think this goes to our relationship with patients too, doesn't it? Because in that time of need, there's nothing a patient can do for us, or so we think. And they're almost at our mercy. And so I think our true character, our true test comes at a time how we treat people who can do nothing for us. I think this is relevant in medicine broadly because we see that vertical violence happens towards the junior doctors and the medical students too, don't we? Towards other staff from the entrenched. There's another quote which I read which says that one of the timeless truths in our life is that the entrenched will always abuse those who are up and coming. And I think in my career I've seen that too. So empathy is not just about our patients, it's about those who are following our footsteps. Empathy is critically important. And I think while we're talking about the importance of empathy, I was reading this paper about what a lack of empathy can lead to. It can lead to dehumanization. It can lead to some brutality in the worst cases. I think about this a lot. I think about this because I've been a patient. I was a patient in a hospital for many months. But at the start of my life, I lived in a place where a lack of empathy led to a conflict that lasted for over 3 decades. I grew up in Sri Lanka. I was talking to Jeremy over the weekend, and he was telling me how he doesn't watch the news anymore or tries to avoid it, and I do too. But every now and again I flick it on and we see conflict all around the world. I'm sad because it was once said that perhaps only the dead see the end of the war, and I wonder if that's the case. Me and my family lived through this war in Sri Lanka for the first 10 years of my life. It was a war between the Sinhalese and Tamil people. And in amongst that conflict, there was another war, a political conflict between the communists and capitalists. Today, I can't tell who's a Sinhalese or a Tamil. I can't tell who's a communist or a capitalist, and I don't care. It's actually one of the things that I find most beautiful about medicine is that we don't have to care. We don't have to care about race. We don't have to care about politics. We don't have to care about where people lives. We don't have to care about any of those things. But through our skill and through our kindness and hopefully through our empathy, we can be a force that unites humanity and transcends our differences. And we can do something for a human being anywhere in the world. Let me tell you a couple of stories about my time in Sri Lanka and the brutality that I saw, where there was an absolute lack of empathy for one another. We lived in this town in central Sri Lanka for a while. It wasn't a big town, it was a medium-sized place. And one day, me, Mum and Dad, we were driving out of our town. I don't remember what for. But those days we often lived in anxiety. When the conflict is raging around you, you don't know what happens next. You're always living in fear. There were curfews all the time. Every time you left the house, the army would pull you over at checkpoints and search you, check your ID. And as a young kid, I saw these big guys with guns, and it was unnerving. So we drove out of our town, and it was a time when the conflict was at its peak. And we drove down this long road, and in the distance, I could see some columns of smoke. They were thin and black, and they were reaching up into the sky like snakes. We kept driving, and we got closer and closer to these columns of smoke. Now I could see that it was coming from piles of tires stacked on top of each other on the side of the road. They were on fire, and we kept driving towards it. And now we passed these tires. There were people being burnt alive inside. I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident. I wish I could tell you that this was the only time I saw this kind of violence, but it wasn't. This was life for so many in the country that I grew up in. And I often wonder how much empathy was there when people pulled other human beings off the street, stacked tires one on top of another while another person held them, and poured petrol onto it and set it alight. What does it take? I remember in our town, there was a dungeon in the middle of the town, and they used to take young men off the streets, teenagers. If they suspected you of being a communist or a terrorist or a separatist, they'll take you and they will put you into this dungeon where there's no light, no food, no warmth, no electricity. and they will tie you to each other and leave you there. I think in times like that, we need good people to do the right thing, and my mum was involved in freeing some of those kids from that dungeon in the middle of our town. But we lived in violence and fear and suffering for a long time. Things got worse and worse and worse, and I think as with many, and I think Leicester is a good example, people go to other places to seek a better life for themselves and their families. And just like that, me, Mum and Dad, we came to Sydney in 1994. It's a bit warmer than the UK. And it's funny, going to Sydney at the age of 10. It was an incredible experience. I've never left Sri Lanka until that time. I've never been on an aeroplane. And it's just the simple things that I remember. Going to a supermarket for the first time and seeing all the different kinds of foods that there were. I remember playing video games and just getting to know the Australian culture. And it was an incredible experience coming to this new country. So we settled into Sydney and we moved a few times, and eventually, I wasn't a very good student, by the way. No one expected me to become a doctor. And again, I was lucky enough to have the love of my mum. She's got me from the police station a couple of times. When I applied for my medical registration for the first time in 2017, I got this letter from the medical board asking why I was arrested on St. Patrick's Day of 2002, and that's, I suppose, my connection to the United Kingdom. We all celebrate St. Patrick's Day in our ways. So I was a lot of trouble for my mum, but I didn't know what I wanted to do when I finished high school, and I think those days, I was really living for myself. I don't think I was thinking about other human beings when I was 17 years old, and I was thinking about what I could get for myself from this world. I wanted to be wealthy. I wanted to have a big house. I wanted to have a nice car. And there was this turning point. So my first job was working for McDonald's. I flipped burgers for a number of years. And I remember one day I worked in the middle of the city, Brisbane, and I saw a lawyer coming through. He was wearing a suit. He looked very impressive. He had a Lawyer's Weekly magazine and a briefcase. And I looked at him and I thought, this guy looks pretty successful. And I knew a few lawyers as well. They drove the Mercedes and had a big house. And I thought, you know what? Maybe this is what I should do. I'll have a successful life. And so I'll become a lawyer. My motivations weren't altruistic. I wasn't thinking about how I could serve people or be useful to the community. I was thinking about what I could get. And so I finished school and I started studying law. Law was an interesting thing. I think I value it a lot more today. But those days I didn't really understand it for the power it had to change lives and to shape our society and to fight for people. And I was just thinking about what I could get, how I could become rich, and what I could do for myself. I also learned something really interesting. I got a job as a law clerk. And interestingly, even though our job was really to solve problems for people, what I was told was to make sure that I bill. I had to bill, right? We bill in 6-minute blocks. So you could do a task for 3 minutes, you bill the clients for 6 minutes, And then he could do another task for 3 minutes, and he could bill a client for 6 minutes. And so suddenly in that 6 minutes, he billed for 12 minutes. And the lawyers in the firm that I worked for, that was all about billing. And people came to us with serious problems. People came to us with problems going on with their families, problems going on with their properties, problems affecting injuries or whatever it might be. And these are deeply personal issues. Some of you may have gone through this in the legal system yourself, and you know how much it affects you. But I think the thing that I learned when I was going through law school and working as a law clerk is that it was less about the person and more about the legal problem, and even more about the billing. And so you lose the person in that process. And I read this beautiful article, which I've quoted here. And I think the last sentence is really important. The primary orientation is the problem, and the person becomes incidental. But we see that in medicine too, don't we? I think we get caught up in the problem. I have a lot of colleagues that come through the NHS. They come for the better weather and the higher pay. So, but they say that in the context of their work, they become caught up in the system and the process and the pressures, and the patient actually becomes incidental to their work. So law taught me that, and eventually I actually got very depressed. I was chasing the wrong things. I wasn't myself, and I became difficult. I became materialistic. I started to party a lot. I was focused more about appearances than anything else. And that led to a very dark time in my life. And so I was in the pits of depression. In 2010, I had a car accident, had a spinal cord injury. I remember being there in the intensive care unit, paralysed, not being able to move. I couldn't even talk a full sentence. Couldn't move my arms those days. And it was shocking. There was this moment in that time where I just wanted to run away. I didn't want to face this situation. I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to leave. But you know, the worst realization was, I can't run. I am stuck. I am paralyzed. And I have to face this situation. There's nothing I can do. But we're here now. 16 years later, I'm here with you in Leicester. Got to get the t-shirt. And I feel like one of the happiest people on earth. I have a great life. I love every moment. But when I had depression, I couldn't feel any joy. I couldn't leave the house. And I was stuck. And I think I was truly paralyzed when I was going through depression. I struggled at university. I lost my job as a law clerk. I couldn't do anything. I lost friends. And I was just in the house all the time. It's actually why I think I'm unparalysed now, because even though physically I'm very different, my soul is free. But you can't see depression, can you? And I think that's one of the things I learned, is that sometimes it's not so much about the things that we can see with our eyes, it's about the things that we cannot see. I went to a couple of emergency departments through that time. I saw a bunch of doctors. No one really got it. No one understood. But eventually, there was one doctor that I found. You know, the interesting thing is, it wasn't anything magical that he did. he just spent a bit of time listening to me. He understood what my life was, who I was. He asked me questions. He knew that I was a law student those days. He knew I had a girlfriend, knew I liked to play basketball. He got to understood me. And then he worked the depression around it. He wrote the letters to the law school so I could get some accommodations, get some extensions that I needed. And he talked to me like a human being, and eventually I recovered. My whole world changed from being this shell of a human being. I started to go outside again. I started to pass the subjects at university. I started to feel joy, connect with people. My entire world changed. And my mom loves this quote, which is that by helping one person, we may not change the world, but we will change the world for them. So thinking back to some of the things that I shared with you now about the person becoming incidental, about us getting caught up in all our work, about us getting distracted, not putting the patient at the center. For me, purpose has become the singularly most important thing about why I go to work today. I work in the busiest emergency department now in Australia, and we see 300-400 patients a day. It's chaos. I also work in Gold Coast, which is kind of like a mini Miami. There's naked people running around. There's things inside butts. You know, I had a student from the UK who came to do his elective with us, and he uses a wheelchair as well. So he spent, I think, around a month in our emergency department. And everyone loved him. He just said, I feel like a normal person here because I get the same opportunities as everyone else. So we loved having him there. And he did a couple of night shifts with me. And you know, the only thing we had that night? Rectal foreign bodies. That was it. So we were pulling things out of butts all night. And I said, when you go back to the UK, you can tell them what you learned here in Australia. So I work in this chaotic environment, and there are pressures. There are ambulances waiting, there are doctors sick, there's all sorts of stuff going on. But I put that aside, and every day I try to remind myself, why am I actually here? Why did I come to work today? Why? It's for the patient in front of me. And the purpose is to leave an impact on someone, hopefully to change their world for the better. And when I started out in medical school, I made a promise to myself. I promised myself that the mission is just to leave one world better. And if I can do that, then I can die happily, and that all this effort will be worth it. And that is what I think about every single day when I go to work. Purpose. I think if we're to have empathy towards our patient, I think it's important for us to be grounded in our purpose. So I teach some medical students back home, and my question to them often is the most boring one, or so they think. Why did you become a doctor? It's funny, you know, I see some courses that prepare these students for their entrance interviews. And they give this advice. They're like, oh, don't give that answer that you just want to help people. That's a boring answer. Actually, that's the right answer. If that is not why we are in this business, if that is not why we come to work, then we need to rethink why we're here, right? Where do we lose that? Where do we lose that? Somewhere along the way, I think people lose that, right? Why are we here? But for me, reminding myself of my purpose has been important every single day. And I don't care if I get fired. I don't care if I meet KPIs. I don't work for Queensland Health. I work for the patient in front of me. They are my purpose. It's why I go to work. And my standard is to treat them like how I'd want my mum to be treated in the hospital. And if I'm not doing that, I fail. Medicine has been so purposeful to me. I love it. I love being a doctor. I love the patients. I love the work. I love everything about it. And finding that purpose through depression is one of the best things that ever happened to me. So I was going through medical school. Life was good. But it all changed for me on the 31st of January, 2010. I had a car accident. I'm looking forward to trying a curry in Leicester. I'm told that they're the best curries on earth here. But you know, one of the best curries on earth that I have is my mum's curry. She makes an excellent curry. This was one of the nights where I went to eat mum's curry, was driving back to my place. My car aquaplaned, rolled over, and I was paralysed in this accident. I cannot begin to tell you what this moment felt like. It's funny, isn't it? Because we see 10, 20, 30 patients a day. And for us, sometimes we just cycle through. Diagnosis, treatment, move on to the next one. I think what we fail to realize sometimes is for that patient, it is the biggest turning point in their entire life. For that patient, their life has changed forever and nothing will be the same again. For that patient, their entire world has collapsed. For us, it just might be a bed number, but for them, it's their whole world. I was paralyzed in that accident, and a fire truck came, cut me out of the car, and I was put into an ambulance, and we started driving away towards the hospital. I was conscious the whole time. But I look up in the ambulance and see a doctor who taught me in medical school. He happened to be on call for the Queensland Ambulance Service that night. He heard the call come through, and he came to the site in this ambulance, and we recognized each other. We connect. And in the few minutes we shared in that ambulance together, he taught me one of the most important lessons about being a doctor. You know, the medicine is easy to learn. I can open a textbook, I can get online, I can even ask AI sometimes these days. All that stuff's easy, right? Drug doses, it's at the palm of your hand. But there are some lessons that, I don't know, here's the lesson though. So we spent probably a total of 10 to 15 minutes in the ambulance. I've seen probably hundreds of doctors from that point. Surgeons, anaesthetists, whatever it might be. But the one that made the biggest impact on me was him. At a time when my world caught on fire, at a time when I was paralyzed, at a time when I was so scared and vulnerable, at a time when I don't even know how to describe it, he made me feel safe. He said, "Everything will be okay. I'm looking after you." He was kind. He spoke to me like a human being. And I trusted him at that time. I think you already give someone that credibility, right? They're a doctor. They know what they're doing. It's not so much about that, but it's the way he treated me. What he taught me in the ambulance at that time is that people may not remember what we do for them, but they will always remember how we make them feel. And actually, my best moments in medicine, it's not being about the things inside butts. Sure, it's interesting sometimes what can fit in there, but it's not being about that. It's not being about the amazing diagnosis or the trauma or the treatment. It's not about that. It's about that moment in the middle of the night where you get a warm blanket for someone and share a few minutes together. It's about the cup of tea that you get the mum whose child is dying. It's about the hug. It's about holding that grandma's hand when she's alone and no one's there. Those are the best moments for me in medicine. He taught me that. I spent 8 months in the hospital after that. Came across hundreds of doctors. I love going to work today. I don't feel like it's work. I just feel like I do a disservice by calling it work. I hate going to a hospital as a patient. I will not do it unless I'm dying. I fear it. Because in those 8 months that I spent in that hospital, I felt disempowered. I felt dehumanized. I didn't know what was happening to me. No one would talk to me. Some mornings I was just a bed number when the ward rounds were happening. There was no opportunity for questions when I was going through this difficult time. I wouldn't see a senior doctor. It was so hard. And actually, I think those 8 months stayed with me to the point where today I actually feel like an outsider in medicine. I don't feel I can relate to my colleagues. And I think a part of that is because of that time, because I saw from the other side what it's like to be a patient. Today, this is more important than ever because over the years, through this paternalistic approach, through this disconnect, I think we have created so much distrust with our patient. We have created this disconnect and we need to figure out how to get back to that time-honored relationship between the doctor and the patient. There are studies coming out now that show patients to find artificial intelligence to be more empathetic than their doctor. How did we get to this point? Because this is the one thing we can offer as a profession now: empathy, care, the human touch. I spent 8 months in the hospital, and the next 4 years were pretty tough for me and my mum. My dad left us. We struggled financially. And there were days when my mum cried, and for us to be here is like a dream. One thing kept me going: the why. It was once said that he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. So our students that we teach, our junior doctors, our colleagues, we talk about resilience and hardship, and from what I understand, the NHS has its own challenges, just like we do in Australia and elsewhere in the world. It's a hard job. How do we help resilience? And I think staying in touch with that why is critically important. I think it's that why that gives us the resilience and the motivation to go on, but it's also what keeps us grounded in that empathy and connection to our patients. I wanted to become a doctor so badly because it was so purposeful to me. I kept going, fought to get back into medical school, and in 2016 I graduated. So we're going into my 10th year now as a doctor. So what is it today that, and that's the graduation actually, that's me and my mom, and such a special day. I still remember the smells and the sights and the sounds. So today, what is it that keeps me going? What is it that I have to remind myself every single day? Well, the why remains important, especially when I go to work. There are so many distractions in our lives. But I think the why is so critically important. And Dr. Frayne, who's here today, we've had some chats over the last few weeks about the joy of medicine, and I think that why gives me the joy. But I think another thing is to stay grounded. We have to stay connected to our fellow humans. We have to stay connected to our patients. We have to stay in the thick of it. And it's actually a part of the reason why I love the emergency department so much, because I feel like it's a window into humanity every single day, and you get to be there. One thing, as we progress in our careers, sometimes we become disconnected, don't we? I've got friends who become radiologists and surgeons, and they live in their big houses and earn their millions of dollars. And funnily enough, they've come so far from why they got into medical school in the first place. And when I talk to them about patients and human beings, they've become so disconnected about what the most beautiful thing about medicine is. So I have a great life today. I've done so many things. And this is me jumping out of an aeroplane. But the funny thing, when I've got to do some of these things, which have been incredibly cool. Jumping out of the plane was one. I got to bungee jump a little while ago. I got to climb this massive bridge in our city for the first time that anyone in a wheelchair has done it. So I've got to do some really cool things in my life. But I want to give you this little insight that I got. When I wanted to go bungee jumping, because it's the one thing I haven't done in my life, I called up this company, and they're about a 2-hour flight away. And I said, I'm going to come and visit your city, and I was hoping to bungee jump. And they're like, okay, great. And I'm like, I use a wheelchair though. And they're like, okay, fine. And I said, okay, do you want to talk about how we're going to do this? Like, nah, just come and we'll figure it out. So I was like, okay, well, I'll come. And so I went there. And there are something like, how many stairs was it, Mom? It was like 190 or something, right? 196. Yeah, 196 stairs. It's 50 meters in the sky. So how am I going to get up these stairs? Like, don't worry about it. We'll carry you up. So these guys carry me up the stairs, and we're up top. I'm very scared by this point. And I said, have you ever done this? He's like, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. So they strap me into this harness, and they're like, do you want to do a somersault on your way down? I'm like, no. Let's just do this normal. And before you know it, I'm doing a somersault off this massive thing, and I bungee jumped, and it was the greatest time of my life. But what made it possible was actually the human touch. It was a bunch of people who wanted to give someone else a chance. It's a bunch of people who had the empathy to understand that I had a dream, that there was something that I wanted to try, and they made it happen for me. And even though the environment was completely inaccessible, the humanity behind it made it happen. And I think these are beautiful examples of empathy, isn't it? Because they can just say no. But they took the time to put themselves in my shoes and give me the memory of a lifetime. So what is it? I know over the next couple of days you're going to go into educating for empathy. You're going to go into the details and the hard conversations. But for me, I hope I've become an empathetic doctor. But for me, what has shaped me to who I am today has been the why. And I think that is so important, isn't it? The why. Because if we're not grounded in that why, we will lose that as the career goes on. The why is important. Why did you become a doctor? Why? The hardship. I think the hardship has been critically important. The hardship has made me who I am. Is it about how we choose medical students? I don't know. There's so much conversation about this these days. Do we go back to interviews? Do we look at people who's not just got the good grades, but have they been through any struggles and hardships? Do they understand humanity? I don't know. I don't have the perfect answer. Another thing is humility. It's so easy to get disconnected as we progress in our careers. We go to the ivory tower and we sit with our friends and we poo-poo everyone on the ground. But for me, staying on the ground, staying amongst the people, and remembering that I'm fallible and I could lose everything, just like I did a number of times in my life, has been important. Humility. Well, I want to leave you with this one last thing before we have a little bit of time for some questions. And this is a passage I read which is, for some reason, often misattributed to Mahatma Gandhi. But it talks about, and I've paraphrased it, and it talks about patients and their role on our premises. I remember when I was an intern, I was like, oh, geez, another interruption to my work. The nurse comes and gets me. This person in bed 8 has a question. I was like, damn it, I'm in the middle of something. But actually, patients are not an interruption to our work. They are the purpose of our work. They are why we exist. And I think that is so important to remember, because as we get caught up in this machinery of work and discharge summaries and charting things and all that nonsense, we forget the purpose of our work. They're not an interruption. They are the purpose of it. But I think most importantly, isn't it a privilege to play a part in another human being's world for the better in this life? And I think that's the other thing. It's not their privilege that we serve them. It's our privilege to serve our patients. To get to do this for a living is an amazing way to spend a life. And it's a joyous way to spend a life. It's a good way to spend a life. And I think when we get to the end of our lives, we can look back and feel that we have done something purposeful. I want to thank you for your passion and for being here today. And it's so exciting to see, because I think if we have more educators like you, the future of this profession and the future of humanity will be bright. Thanks for giving me a chance.